I would like to turn today's program over to your first presenter, Scott Opitz, General Manager of AltaSoft. You may begin.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. What we'd like to do today is to talk to you primarily about a new offering from Kofax that some of you may have seen a little bit about, others maybe not. It's an application called Kofax Analytics for Capture, and it's really targeted at providing tools which allow us to optimize interaction with our systems of engagement and our capture operations around what you generally are well familiar with from Kofax itself. Joining me today is Dimitri Snowden. Dimitri is a Senior Systems Engineer with the AltaSoft group within Kofax. As you may be aware from about 6 months ago, AltaSoft was acquired by Kofax, and what we're going to talk about today is how some of that technology is applied to the Kofax platform as a way of providing additional insight into that. So I'm going to kick us off here, talk a little bit about how all of this fits together from a product and what the driver was for the development of the Kofax Analytics for Capture product, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dimitri, who's going to really show you the exciting part of it, which is he's going to take you through some use cases of exactly how a tool like this, when in place, could allow you to better, investigate and discover what's happening within your capture operation. So let's get started. So what is the driver for why we need analytics, right? I mean, why do we need something special? I mean, obviously there are other technologies out there that can be applied to this type of challenge. But the issue is, though, is that when we think about enterprise capture environments, when we think about the most sophisticated of the environments, frankly, they really challenge what is possible with conventional analytics products. And this is really for several reasons, right? The first is, when you think about the nature of an enterprise capture environment, or really any capture environment of any sophistication at all, is that I'm by my very nature, right, in a multi-channel operation, I'm acquiring data from many disparate channels, right? So I could have data delivered to me in any number of different ways, in any number of different forms. And so being able to keep track of that and deal with that from an analysis perspective is particularly key. The second thing is that these operations can span, both geography as well as, business organizational boundaries, right? So that I may have not only different computing resources in different geographies, but I actually may have them under the control of other business units or other operational groups, even within my organization or perhaps within partner organizations. And so the ability to provide end-to-end analytics over that, of course, is therefore even further challenged. And then finally, the types of things that I want to analyze include both those which are automated, right? So things that can be set up, configured within the software to run on its own and automatically process things, as well as those which are manned, where I have the need to be able to understand what the impact of my human resources are in the execution of my activities. So when we take all of that into consideration, and we think about how we've tackled this in the past, obviously we've applied, and Kofax certainly has done this. Many of you may be familiar with the Kofax Capture Advanced Reporting product. So we've attempted to use traditional reporting tools to go in and manage your operation using those tools. But what we found is, as we talked to our customers and our partners, we found that they really sort of fell short, especially in these more sophisticated environments. And one of the reasons that they fall short is this idea that the analysis that they do with conventional BI tools tends to be limited to just a perspective on discrete steps. So I might be able to do reports that talk to me about what's happening within the scanning steps of my process, or something else that talks to me maybe about some statistics about what's happening in the validation step of my activity. But there's nothing that really ties it together to say that, I understand how one flows into the next to truly understand how my operation is running. The second issue, of course, is that these tools, by their very nature, right, they tend to be legacy reporting tools. And so, they're not to be too unkind, but they're not the easiest tools to use. And so we need people with particular skills to be able to do this, and that typically is limited to, or at least in large part, the folks that will come out of IT. But of course, IT is already greatly strained, right? So the ability to go to them and quickly say, look, I need somebody to jump on a report right away, the reality is it's pretty unlikely in a lot of organizations that you would have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And then the last point here is that, even if I could manage to get things done, at least to get me to some starting point, I don't have the luxury of having a business environment that's static, right? So my business needs change, and therefore what I need to analyze and manage my operation and really ultimately optimize my operation is something that, is going to drive the need for change in a lot of these analytics tools and the perspectives they can provide me. So what we think is, when you think about what was our vision and what was the real driver behind the Analytics for Capture product that you're going to see, is we believe that there's this concept of needing a unified analysis of my overall capture environment, and something that really gives me, over the entire operation, this single comprehensive view, right? So that I have one quick space to see exactly what's going on end-to-end in my operation. And part of that is, I need to be able to track my batches holistically from start to finish. I don't want to think of them, monolithically or as a bulk group of batches, right? I want to understand how each batch is being executed, but I want to understand it end-to-end. I want to be able to understand, in a very integrated way, how all of my operational resources are being impacted by what I'm doing. And operational resources can really most typically take two forms. So this could be my human operators, right? My team, my staff that are actually running, a lot of the technology when human intervention is required for the non-automated steps. And then my underlying equipment that's either supporting those manual steps or, in fact, purely executing the fully automated steps. So I need to understand exactly how that's working, and importantly, how that ties up into the actual impact on the overall operation. And then finally, one of the big benefits of being able to get this information, of course, is to be able to ferret out examples or opportunities for improvement. Well, something that goes from a theory for potential improvement to reality, hopefully there's a step in between there where you do some serious testing and analysis to determine if it's a safe, change to make. And so this ability to perform, classic what-if analyses, to be able to go in and say, if I were to add additional resources and people and equipment, or change the processing rule to see how that would affect things, what would the ripple effect of that be, both in resource utilization as well as cost, right? So the ability to play out those scenarios in advance before having to, put it into effect and hope that you were right without the ability to test it. So this all brings us, of course, to the main topic today, which is Kofax Analytics for Capture, which, Dimitri's going to give you a good picture of here in a second. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about, what it is in a general sense, right? So first of all, a great way to think about it is a library of pre-built best practices for all of the metrics and analyses, the key performance indicators, all of the, the particular analytics that you would want to have available to you to be able to monitor your environment. And, I think a very important point here that we pride ourselves on is that, this is not something that we locked ourselves in a room and just sat around dreaming up by ourselves, right? This is something that came from discussions with customers, requests that we've received over, a period of time, talking to business process outsourcers, some of our service bureaus, to really collect this super set of ideas and put them into the product. And again, over time, as we get more and more input to that, you'll be able to see, additional capabilities in the dashboard. The dashboards themselves are web-based, and they are highly interactive. And I stress that point because, it's hard to find any business intelligence product today of any credibility that doesn't have some type of dashboard that has at least some minimal amount of interactivity. But one of the things that was key for us is that because we can't assume that the users of these dashboards, the user of this Analytics for Capture product, is really going to be a deep technical person, they will be, in many cases, business people or operational people who really just need to understand what's happening. And so this ability to make them highly interactive, to let them go in and manipulate the data, do discovery to figure out what's going on, explore any aspect of the operation, and to do this on demand as they need to do it, we think is particularly key, and hopefully you'll see that reflected in what we show you here today. These data discovery features, that I mentioned, that's a term of art today that's used in the BI space, right? So if you listen to Gartner and other analyst organizations like that, you'll hear data discovery thrown around as a term. What it really means is it means empowering the end user to be able to go in, and as they decide what the, with finer and finer definition, what the problem is they're trying to get an answer to, it basically allows them to go in and try to discover what's happening to get them to this path of discovering the best opportunities for performance improvement. And then finally, again, because we don't expect these users, and frankly, really any user of this, to have to be, a technical developer, a programmer, a database guy, that sort of thing. We believe that this all has to be built around, and hopefully you'll see that today, a set of point-and-click tools that allow you to go beyond the pre-built libraries of dashboards and what you're going to see demonstrated first into a set of intuitive drag-and-drop type tools to be able to customize dashboards and reports, as well as to use the 40 or so metrics that exist today in version 1 of the product to be able to create new displays or new views to exploit that data. So if I think about this, kind of to wrap this up before I turn it over to Dimitri, is I think about the real advantages of this that I'd ask you to keep in mind as Dimitri goes through his example. And I've asked Dimitri to take you through, rather than just a here's a set of features type demo, is to actually take you through some real use cases that we heard from customers about how they try to get to the bottom of what's going on in their operation, to give it some more meaning. But those use cases, again, came out of what we consider to be both ourselves, all modesty aside, and also our customers, who are really the leaders in thinking about multi-channel capture. And so these best practices, again, being integrated in so that our customers don't have to go try to figure this out for themselves, and reinvent the wheel. I think it's extremely important as well to consider that how tightly integrated this solution is with the overall Kofax suite of products, and that's something that will continue to add and enrich the product over time. And of course, it gives you also the comfort level to know that without having to go off and figure out how to get some third-party analytics product to work with the Kofax product, you basically are guaranteed that it's going to work seamlessly, because of course, one part of our company can talk to the other part of the company and know exactly what the data looks like and exactly what we're trying to get out of the system. And then the last point here, which I think is important, especially for those more advanced of you, is the fact that it is built on the AltoSoft Business Intelligence platform. So why is that important? Well, first of all, the AltoSoft Business Intelligence platform is coming up on about 7 years in existence, and it's in its 4th major generational release. It's the same platform that's been used at leading financial services institutions like Bank of America, PNC Bank, Boston Financial, just a variety of some of the largest financial services companies, as well as a number of healthcare organizations, some of the largest in the country, the Geisingers, Cleveland Clinics, Mount Sinai's, and such. So it's been proven to be both stable and have the performance necessary to stand up in those enterprise environments. The dashboards that we can produce, and again, I think you'll make your own judgment of this when you see them, the dashboards that we produce are really on the cutting edge of visualization. So the ability to manipulate data in a very intuitive way, and really at the sort of the pinnacle of what's a possibility today within these types of tools. And then probably, for, again, the more pragmatic reason for a number of you is that as we're out talking to, different clients about the Analytics for Capture offering, what we find is that there's a high degree of interest, frankly, in being able to combine the Kofax Analytics for Capture technology and assets with other data that comes from sources that are other than the Kofax environment to really provide a deeper, richer understanding of what's happening, within the operation and what actions in the operation really mean to the business itself, based on any data coming out of any system of record or other data. And I want to be very clear here, that is not a core capability of Analytics for Capture, but because it's built on the AltoSoft platform, it absolutely can be extended so that any of the work that you've done in the Analytics for Capture environment, either using what we've built for you or anything you may have customized yourself, can run on exactly the same platform where you can incorporate other data sources, build other metrics and other dashboards as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is I want to pass the microphone over to Dimitri and have him take you through, as I said, a good use case demo of exactly how the product works and how you might, tackle specific types of issues you might deal with every day, using these types of tools versus the other more static reports or other more manual ways that you might have to attack it. So, Dimitri, over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. So finally, again, a dashboard that gives me a comprehensive look over my entire operation. And by the way, getting this information in one of a couple of ways. So one is through Scott's initial point, be it that it's about self-service, right? I no longer have to wait till the end of the day or the end of the week or even a couple of days to get the reports to figure out what's going on and reconcile issues. And further, I actually can get alerts based on certain thresholds being exceeded, getting close to certain thresholds. I can get alerted and notified based on those. So again, just glancing at our brief overview here, we can see we have 55 batches in our system. We have a bunch of documents and pages within those batches. I can see the modules we have online, the number of batches inside of those modules, their queue times. I see our operators and the modules they're logged into. And again, remember, regardless of where your operation spans, whether it's all in one location, a data center, or across several remote locations, it doesn't matter. You're looking at the aggregate or the sum of all activities in your operation and can further slice and dice that however you see fit. So for example, right now I can slice and dice my work by batch class. But again, to Scott's earlier point, if I wanted to use my capabilities to customize these views, I can slice and dice this by remote site A or remote site B or so on, or further drill down to some interval of time that makes more sense to me or that I'm very curious about. And then lastly, down here to the right, we have the number of batches by batch class. So again, back to my earlier point, I'm here because it's about self-service. I'm just that type of person that likes to come here every 5 minutes to keep my thumb on the operation. So I'm instantly greeted with some indicators here, right? So the green ones, of course, aren't ones that I'm concerned with. They're within my SLA threshold, and that's great for me. This one in orange, though, it's actually a good thing because it's a way of being able to understand what's getting ready to break, right? A fuzzy notification, if you will. Who wants to get a notification after it's already broken or once the SLA threshold has been exceeded? Well, quite frankly, at that time, it's too late. So I want to know, and I want the system to notify me when I'm getting close or approaching that particular SLA threshold, and I've done so by indicating that in orange. And then lastly, above that, the KTM server, well, quite frankly, that is horrible, right? That's at 217 seconds, as indicated in red with the clever red circle next to it. That's horrible. So we have to drill into that particular module and find out what's going on. So before I do, my first thought is, well, perhaps this is the sum of all batches that are equaling this high queue time. So in order to figure that out and make sure if I'm either correct or wrong, I'm actually going to drill into that module and look inside of it. And in doing so, I get the 7 batches inside of that module. I get their status, the queue times, the priority, the batch ID, and so on. But what stands out to me again is, well, there's actually only one batch that is equaling that high queue time. It's not the sum of all of them. It's just that one. So now my next thought is, okay, well, maybe that one batch is just really, really large. We just have like a bazillion pages in it, like 10,000 pages. It's just taking up all the resources in the system, and it's causing queue time. So now I'm going to drill down into the batch and get that batch's history. Now, again, this is beautiful because in my particular operation, I have several remote sites, and my workflow spans across those remote sites. And by the way, those are across large spans of geography, right? But I'm still able to understand where it's flown and the order in which it's gone through certain modules. Again, I see its status, the batch class is associated with, and then look, it only has 3 documents and 4 pages. So, all right, here's what we do know. The KTM server is an unintended module, so it has nothing to do with my operator's behavior in terms of the high queue time, right? It's not because they're logged out or they're on break. It actually has nothing to do with their behavior. Secondly, I also know it's not because it's a large batch. I mean, this is actually a nominal batch. It only has 4 pages in it. So it has to be one of 2 things. It's got to be either network connectivity, right? We lost connectivity, or 2, we have a resource issue where we're just low on hard disk space, or maybe we've maxed out on memory. The point is, with about 2 or 3 clicks, I was able to figure this out and didn't have to, interview a whole bunch of people on the floor, or further, wait until I got this report at the end of the day. Now, again, if this is 8 o'clock in the morning for me and I typically get this report at the end of the day, well, this SLA threshold would have persisted about 8 hours. That's a lot of time. And quite frankly, at that time, I probably would have had several more batches to review with the same type of status. So, okay, all right, this is great. We figured out that this is a hardware issue. The next question is, well, again, to Scott's earlier point, it's the what-if factor. I need to be able to start modeling the cost implications. I have to be able to ask someone if I can make it an extended request and model that before I do so. So I'm going to zip over here to our labor cost report. And in doing so, I'm presented with our cost model. And I can see that our total operational costs are about $2,900 an hour. I can see our modules here, and again, the costs that are associated with them. And in my operation, these are the costs I've come up with, and these are user-defined. So in your operation, they can be a bit different. So for me, I simply took the VM license and my electricity bill, if you like, and divided it over 24 hours, and this is the amount I came to. When it gets to some of my manned modules, I simply added their hourly cost to that VM instance. So in this case, it's $10 an hour for the machine itself and $15 an hour to my operator. Thus, the overall hourly cost for this KTM validation module is $25. But again, back to the KTM server. Currently, it's costing me about $40 an hour. I'm going to double this just to simulate spinning up another instance, right? It's already high as it is, so we're probably running into something that's concerning a hardware resource issue. So again, I'm going to double this, spinning up another instance to simulate spinning up another instance. And when I do my entire cost model updates, my cost per module updated, my total operational cost now raised to $3,600 an hour. And then lastly, the operators that may have been associated or logged into that particular module, well, their costs have gone up and gone down as well. So again, now just with a couple more clicks, I can figure out, all right, we have an issue, I can reconcile it, I know it's hardware, and I can start modeling it. I can go through the what-ifs and when it comes to this particular issue and get it reconciled and figure out how I'm going to move forward. So the next part of your operation that's most important is classification and extraction, and further understanding where human intervention is required. We all understand that when human intervention is required in any business process, well, that part of the process gets very, very, very expensive. So I'm going to zip over here to our no-touch processing report, and this gives me an outlay of my 5 document classes, and what I'm presented with at the top is remittance advice. Well, this one's great. Again, it's green. It's within my SLA threshold. We don't have to touch it a bunch. It's actually my model dot class. Envelope and other, they're okay, as indicated by orange. Again, it's kind of that fuzzy area, right? They're getting close to being touched too much, so I want to be kept abreast of it, but they're here. Healthcare and check, well, they're not good at all, and check is actually horrible. It's 0%. But look over here to the right. We've processed about 2,500 checks, and we've touched all of them but 2. That's completely horrible. So let's think about this for a minute. If we have the very experienced operator, right, in our operation, and they take, I don't know, 4 to 6 seconds to validate a document, you multiply that times 2,500 documents, that's several hours. Go ahead and multiply that times their hourly rate, let's say $15 an hour, roll that up a few months, a quarter, half year, across a couple of remote sites. That's tens of thousands of dollars already that we've just spent, again, in human intervention because either their behavior or an errant business rule or condition. The point is that I actually can isolate that intervention and its cost down to the dot class level and further dig into this dot class to figure out what's going on. So, all right, check is the one that's giving me a headache here. I'm going to now get over here to dot classification, and I'll be presented again with my 5 document classes. Check is at the top. And our system confidence, though, for check is about 81%. Now, that's not bad. Again, we got the whole orange thing. It's the fuzzy there. We're getting close to it being low, but it's not bad. So we're pretty confident a check is a check. But the previous report told me that we have to touch it a bunch. So now I'm thinking, well, maybe something about reclassification or the day of the week or maybe operator. So I'm going to actually look at the aggregate of all my dot classes here. And again, in particular, we're going to click on the check wedge because that's the one that's in question. And my first thought, again, was something regarding day of week, something cyclic. So I'm going to drill it down by day of week and see what we get. And lo and behold, of course, the majority of reclassifications took place on Friday. Now, again, this is not ideal, but I'm also not surprised. We're human. It's Friday. I like to go home. It's ready for the weekend. It's payday. It makes sense, right? So now I'm thinking, who do I need to talk to about these particular reclassifications and further possibly retrain? So I'm now going to click on the Friday wedge, which again is the biggest one, and break it down by operator. And when I do, it's only one operator. It's Scott. Now, Scott, I know we worked on your training last week, and I thought that we were going to get this tightened up, but it looks like he still has a bit of work to do. Now, this exercise was a bit interesting, and it doesn't quite reconcile my issue, but it is good to know that he was responsible for those 22 reclassifications. I want us to keep this in the back of our mind. I'm going to actually circle back to this to make sure I'm actually correct about my assumption here. So again, back to the check document class. We're pretty confident a check is a check, but the previous report said we have to touch it a bunch. So at this case, it has to be something at the field level. So now I'm going to zip over here to my field report and be presented with a list of all the fields. Now initially this could seem quite unhelpful, but what we've done is, again, empowered you to slice and dice with your standard components such as a filter, but further use other components to filter other components. The beauty in this is that, again, if I have a dot class, I get all the fields specific to that dot class once I've selected it. So again, check is the one in question. I'm now going to look at the fields specific to the check document class. I now want to sort this grid by the highest change ratio, because again, I want to know, okay, well, which field are we touching the most? In doing so, acceptable payee pops up at the top. All right, well, that's surprising, but it's not surprising that I'm seeing it's got 0 confidence. That actually explains exactly why we have to touch all those checks. We've changed it a bunch of times, thus our change ratio is about 99%. So I've made a selection and selected my dot class, and now I'm going to make a selection and select my field. So I click on a field, which again is acceptable payee, and the first thing I'm presented with, and of course I know this because it's my environment, right, is that within the check document class, we scanned it about 36 times, but yet when I pull up this window, this number is a bit bigger. So now I'm thinking, okay, well maybe this field appears on another document class. Now that I think about it, I actually remember that we added a new document class to our operation, and I forgot to adjust my rule. So now when I think back to that chart, that pie that had the 22 reclassifications, it's actually not Scott's behavior or his retraining that's needed. It's actually me. I actually had an errant rule and condition that's specific to the acceptable payee field that I need to fix. So again, this is great. I was actually able to figure this out, and I didn't have to go down to the floor and talk to Scott or further even start instituting training when it wasn't even required to begin with. That's wonderful. So this has saved me, again, a lot of time and a lot of money already. But I digress. Back to acceptable payee. When I get this particular window, I get all the documents that this field has appeared on. Again, 0 confidence, nothing was recognized, and again, after validation, this is what was keyed in. So if I click on any random document, I'm going to get something pretty beautiful here. I get an extract of this document. This is effectively the pre and the post of that document, before and after validation, and further, what was changed in a particular field by an operator. So here you see a list of all the fields on the document, of course. We recognize 0 characters in this particular field. There was nothing in there, but after validation, this is what was keyed in by the operator. If I scroll down a bit in this document, I see some other stuff we missed. Now, I've only flagged the things that have been changed. I don't really care about the things that weren't changed because we're an exception-based environment, so again, I only want to look at the stuff that we've altered. Legal amount was another field we missed. 0 characters, we picked up nothing in that field, but after validation, 798 was keyed in. Same thing here. The letter S is all we read, but after validation, apartments.com was entered in by the operator. So even though I'm looking at this particular field, I can actually see other fields in this document that we're missing. Now, these aren't quite the focus of my interest, but it's good to know because I might want to circle back and now sort this grid by these particular fields to get some more insight. But again, acceptable payee is the one that's sticking out, and I also know I have an issue with another document class. So now I'm going to bring this to a conclusion and just really bring it home and make sure I'm on point with what I'm thinking. So the other document class that I know I brought on earlier this week was remittance advice, and I'm curious if that's the one that has this other field. So again, I'm going to make a selection, select the remittance advice document class. I'm not going to sort this grid by alpha, and in doing so, of course, acceptable payee pops up at the top, and it's just that number is pretty close to the balance of times that it actually appears between those 2 document classes. So it looks like between check and remittance advice, acceptable payee is the errant field that's causing the reclassifications, and further, why we have to touch the check document class all those times. So one more thing I just want to check to make sure that I'm actually thinking that everything is specific between check and remittance advice. I'm going to go to our separations or reclassification report, and in doing so, I'll be presented with a grid. And to the left here, I'll see a high concentration of dots that are very specific to and what they should have been classified as initially. So remittance advice is great. 971 are what they were supposed to be, but as I look down this list, I can see that 21 were changed to check, and then 6 other of those were changed to envelope. And if I look at check here, 607 again were good, but if I scroll down this list, I can see that 17 were changed to remittance advice. So clearly between remittance advice and check, I have an issue, and again, it's because of that key field, acceptable payee. That's what's causing my, my document reclassifications. So there's a bunch more views here, but I'm going to pause here for a second and now move on to the designer aspect of the tool, which enables you to be able to edit and build your own views based on the metric assets that we've defined for you.
Dimitri, before you do that, let me just remind everybody on the phone, we are getting some questions in, but by all means, if you have questions that you're starting to build up in your mind or as they come to you, remember to enter them into the Q&A panel, not the chat panel. We don't see the chat panel here, so put them into the Q&A panel and make sure that they get on our list here so we can get to them. So back over to you.
Okay, thank you. So again, back to the designer. This is a very powerful part of the tool. So throughout some of the views I showed you, and actually all the rest of the views, this only took about 18 metrics to give you this richness. Again, the ability to slice and dice, change intervals of time, change components on the fly. All this is the power of the end user holds all this power to be able to do this. But further, as a super user, you actually can change and modify the way these reports look in context to what's most important to you in your operation. So I can simply grab out one of the metric assets that's available to me. I can drop it on my canvas. And this is a free-form canvas, by the way. I'm not constrained by some blocks or 4 cubes. I can put this wherever I want. Further, I can now change the way this chart looks, and I like donuts. I'm actually kind of hungry, by the way. And I can break it down by any dimension, and right now I'll just leave it by day. I can change the drill down order. I can select certain drill downs, and then again change the order in which the operator or user would do so. And then further, I can even predefine the drill down, so it actually drills down in a particular order. All these behaviors are natural behaviors and inherent behaviors of any component all charts and components inside of Designer. So you have this capability. Further, we have obviously other things that give this the true richness, which is menus and buttons. And it sounds a bit ridiculous that I'm mentioning a menu as a feature, right? But what this empowers you to do is build an analytic application. So you can see here that throughout as I was moving through my story, this was actually the way in which I'd want my users and operators to start thinking about their workflow. So that it's more than just a menu that navigates me to other dashboards, but it's also the way in which I want them to start thinking about how to solve problems. So first we start on the operational side, which is kind of that real-time, what's going on right now. Then we move on to operator behavior, because again, it's always probably operator error before it is the machine, right? So we want to look there. Next, you move on to the document level detail. And then lastly, if you didn't reconcile it within the document, you'd have to get a bit deeper. You would drill down into the field or character level detail as well in there. So back to Designer. Again, this is where you're able to design all these components. Again, enjoy the richness of being able to dictate how you want this analytic application to look and feel for end users, assigning a myriad of actions and output actions to individual components throughout the menu, pulling up intranet sites that you may have inside of your network, assigning different functions like bookmarks or replace view or even log out or print, if you will. All that can be defined by you as the super user. And then lastly, of course, the ability to be able to send these reports at some interval of time, right? You want to be able to get these maybe once a day or once an hour. Again, that's all native to the tool. So again, I can set this here every day or every hour starting today. I want this report to be sent. I'll put a header because it's from ABC department. I'll put my footer. And then further, I can put who it should go to with a list of email addresses here. And of course, we support any security schema that might be inherent to your operation. So that kind of wraps up where I am in terms of the metric assets, the richness and the availability or the ability to be able to change views and edit them based on the context in which you want to be able to deliver data to your end users, and obviously the way the end user can consume the data to get their job done in a more proficient manner. Scott?
Okay, so let me take that back from you, Dimitri. So you guys should be seeing my slide again now. So what I thought would make sense here would be, let's kind of wrap it up and just sort of summarize what we've seen and learned, and then get into some of the questions that we have here, which I think will help us drill down a little bit more. So if you look at Kofax Analytics for Capture, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that just going through that use case that Dimitri showed us there, the ability to really, very, very efficiently drill into a problem, understand what really is happening, and then be able to take action to really improve your operation is a core part of this. I mean, obviously, that's just the flow of how you saw him go through it, is a very efficient way to tackle those types of problems, which otherwise can be quite complex. The ability to do this, of course, and especially the last bits that you saw there, with the ability to even customize your user interface if you're a person who has the rights to do that. I mean, Dimitri made a good point, which is he specified it as a sort of a super user, but you have very fine-grained control to decide who's allowed to go in to design a dashboard and who's not. Maybe, probably in a lot of cases, there might be a number of folks that you don't want to give that to, simply because if you do, then you may end up having to spend time teaching them, right, how to deal with it. So you may have a smaller group of people who you actually would fully trust to do that, but maybe not the rest. And so that ability to have that fine-grained control to tailor it to the way you want to work is we think, particularly important. I think the idea of also this having objectivity in monitoring the performance and productivity of human operators is particularly key. There are in a number of enterprise capture environments, there are cases where the work and the decision making that the individual human operators have to make is in some cases some of the most important decisions in certain industries. And so in those cases, making sure that they're both performing up to the requirements that you set for them as far as their own individual performance, as well as productivity factors and others. But the ability to do this objectively with numbers, so instead of somebody having to say qualitatively, it seems like so-and-so is taking too long to do that task, or we think that we have a higher error rate with this person. It just strikes me that their customers or accounts that they're dealing with complain more often. Well, instead of having to do that qualitative stuff, the ability to actually look at numbers, determine where the areas are that require attention. It's not always a negative thing either, by the way. In many cases, an opportunity where you realize that all individuals struggle with a particular activity or task, and what you may realize is, in fact, your training of them or something in the way the system is set up is just not the most productive for them. And then finally, this ability to work in, and we're pretty careful with our words here, we would always say near real time. To us, real time means right down to the millisecond. But to be able to understand your data that's updating on intervals, maybe even as little as a minute update at a time, can really let you analyze real-time trends, and to be able to see that in a visual way to help the anomalies really stick out and be obvious to you. And I think probably the most important thing, right, is this is not just an optimistic view of the future. This is here today. So we actually have some of our initial customers who are already engaged with the product, and early reports back are extremely positive on that. So it is something that without very much work, being able to bring into your environment, take advantage of it today. So with that, I'd like to transition over to some questions here. So hopefully Dimitri and I will be able to get through these. So let's tackle them here. Again, by all means, anybody else, we've still got a reasonable amount of time left here in the session. So any other questions you want to add to the list, feel free to stack them up there, and we'll get to as many as we can and answer the rest separately if we can't get to them all. So one of the questions that came up is related to, and I'll paraphrase this a little bit, but for historical analysis, how long does the system retain data? Okay, and so I'll interpret that basically to mean that if I want to do analysis over time, right, especially if I'm looking at productivity numbers, or I'm looking at error rates, or touch ratios, or things like that, something that might indicate, am I getting better or losing ground as far as my operational efficiency and productivity? How long can I go back and look at it, right, if I think I'm making changes over a period of time? Because we know in the environment, right, you might not want to keep all of that data, or you might be purging that data on a regular basis, so that, it'd be great to be able to have a place where you can do that. There is a very cool feature as part of the AltaSoft platform, which is very much exploited in the Kofax Analytics for Capture product, and that is the ability that whenever we process any data, do any calculation, and then, capture all of the dimensional data that you might want to use to slice and dice that data, we can keep just those computed values and just the data you need to do, to basically do the analysis you want to do over time. And candidly, it just really comes down to how much database space do you want to use. So you could keep it, we fully envision if it goes the way other industries are, where people do similar types of, solutions based on on the AltoSoft technology. In some places they're capturing now, they're in their, third or fourth year of capturing data so they can show long-term trending. Let's see. So, okay, really good question. Let's make sure it's clear. So are all of the dashboards and reports that were shown here included? Absolutely, yes. And in fact, there's a lot more that we didn't touch on rather than go through literally every menu item one by one. Basically what there are currently about 40 metrics that are defined in the environment. I think, Dimitri, you said there were about how many that actually shown in the views?
About 18.
About 18, so less than half actually that are actually surfaced there. But there are more metrics available that you might want to exploit in sort of more specific business cases. But everything that you saw here, the entire dashboard, that is the idea, is that it is a pre-built set of dashboards and reports so that you do not have to create them from scratch. And as you can imagine, these are the ones that apply most universally to all of our, enterprise capture customers. But that's where some of those other metrics might be something more specific to you that might make more sense in a accounts payable processing situation, or in a maybe a customer onboarding application, or some other area where it's more germane. Another question is, will the dashboards evolve over time? Okay, so I guess the heart of that question is really, okay, this looks cool, but is it done? I mean, are we done? Put a bow on it. We're not going to do any more. No, that's not the case. In fact, what we're looking at is treating this just like any other product, right? So the whole idea here is that this product will have its own life cycle, and just as we benefited from a lot of input that came into the product to get us to where we are right now, okay, we're also looking to continue to capture that feedback, find broader use case scenarios, and then basically continue to enhance the dashboard. So you will see, a typical 1.1, a 2.0 someday, and they'll just get, broader, deeper, richer. And then for those of you who may be using us in more vertical areas, although we haven't announced any specific ones yet, you could imagine that having very vertically specific dashboard extensions of these sort of horizontal pieces, over time to basically grow the applicability to those specific business areas. Let's see, is it possible to expand the dashboard to include data from other systems? Well, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but let me clarify. So the answer is absolutely yes, but it's a very important point to make sure that there's no confusion for those of you who may be talking to your Kofax business managers and understand the difference between analytics for capture and what is the full AltoSoft platform. So the Analytics for Capture product does give you the ability to go in and modify the dashboards, use those other metrics and things like that exist there that are not yet surfaced in the dashboards that you see today. But the Analytics for Capture product is really constrained to just using Kofax itself, or the Kofax underlying databases, as its data source. So by its very nature then, you're only going to be able to use data that's been mapped into those data sources. So the question, and it suggests, and as I kind of hinted at earlier, is that there might be a desire to expand the dashboard to include data from other systems to either enrich the analysis or just complement it in any other way. And so the answer is yes, you can do that, but the way that you do that is not solely through Analytics for Capture. You would combine Analytics for Capture with the AltoSoft platform itself, the horizontal kit, if you will, and then use the AltoSoft tools to extend, but with the ability to take all the assets that exist in this library of dashboards and then import them into the general purpose AltoSoft platform so they could be freely mixed and matched. Let's see. Question here about is there any training documentation? Yeah, so basically just like all other Kofax products, you'll see that, and again, this is a first release, so it won't be as rich as something that's in its later generations, but certainly already you'll see CBT materials for this. There's other documentation that are part of this. I mean, that's a core requirement that we have as a company, that those things have to exist to, to release a product. So certainly that stuff that exists. There was a question here about what is the license cost, and so that's the benefit of Dimitri and I doing the jobs we do, is that that's such a broad question. We're not going to get into that on this call because it's very specific to the particular configuration that you're applying it to, but I'm sure that my colleagues will take a note of that and make sure that, wherever you are, we'll have the right person reach out to you there to answer any questions. I would encourage anybody who is interested in what you've seen here, by all means, reach out to your Kofax contacts and or feel free to, send me an email, send Dimitri an email, and we'll connect you with the right person to get those questions answered for you more precisely for your situation. Another question is, are the reports near enough to real-time to display on a billboard-style big screen in a scan bureau? Well, they certainly could be, and it really comes down to what's the nature of your operation. Again, this will have a lot to do with the configuration and which data you're looking at. So certain things like the earlier sort of analyses that Dimitri did, in fact, everything on the original home page that came up are really all, can all be real-time operations. They tell you the exact state of the world as it is today. As you get deeper down into some of the other capabilities, some of those are more dependent on the batch being completed. So by all means, the data is updated as fast as we get the data about the batch being completed, but it might not tell me more granularly what's happening inside the processing of the batch at this point. So we do have, and I can tell you not specifically around analytics for capture, but I can tell you that in the use of the AltoSoft platform in other industries, in particular one in healthcare that's very popular, they do exactly what you're describing, which is to put up a billboard for everybody within that group to be able to watch the status of how things are being processed, what the performance ratios are, where the bottlenecks might be, all of those, and it's up on a plasma, up on the wall somewhere, and everybody sees it all day long. Let's see. Does this work with KTM and KTM special packages like medical? Well, certainly with KTM, you're seeing KTM data being surfaced here. So everything we're doing here with respect to classification, that's all KTM source data. So by all means, KTM is a very key contributor to the Analytics for Capture dashboard. By the way, if you are a Kofax Capture customer and you have not yet implemented KTM, or you're in the process of implementing it but would like to see if this could help you before that, by all means, everything else that you saw there that is specifically Kofax Capture data related works perfectly fine even if KTM is not present. So it's just a question of how much of the richness of the entire dashboard and all of those 40 metrics would be available if you didn't happen to have KTM in place. The other part of the question was specific packages like medical. As I said earlier, at this point today, unless the data you're talking about is really unique horizontally to all sort of KTM and KC type analyses, it's not going to necessarily have something special in a screen that talks particularly about medical. But as we evolve those solutions that I mentioned earlier, you might imagine that it's a natural for us to have very industry-specific dashboard extensions for these types of things. Let's see. Question, is the horizontal platform, meaning I assume you mean AltoSoft, available through Kofax? And the answer is that any one of your Kofax account managers, either directly or working in partnership with their AltoSoft peers, can actually be the point of delivery. So you could actually purchase it, you can procure it, and manage it through your existing Kofax contracts. And our sales support and sales operations teams are already have a mechanism by which that they can do that for you, so you don't have to go off and develop a completely separate set of agreements and things like that. Let's see here. I think maybe down to the last two here. So can I be notified when data changes even if I am not logged into the dashboard? Well, the answer actually is yes. So this is really what we call as our alerting system or incident management system. You may be certainly familiar with this in other trouble ticket systems and things like this, but it's kind of unique in a business intelligence analytics world. We actually do have the ability that we can use any of those defined metrics or any data associated with them. We can use those as conditions to test for, you know, out of bounds conditions, right? So that if somebody says, you know, I want to know that Dimitri was showing an example earlier of those things that get into orange state, right? So they're not quite a serious problem yet, but they are getting close enough that I'm worried about them. And so in those cases, we could actually set up an alert condition that basically monitors any number of metrics that you want to specify, and then basically says that when it gets within whatever range you specify specific to your organization and your preferences, to automatically dispatch a notification that says, you know, to tell you, or even better, it can even be dispatched to a role so that in case you're not available, it could dispatch to a group of people or dispatch to an individual, and if that individual doesn't respond in a certain amount of time that you can specify, it can automatically be escalated to someone else who's affiliated with them. So it's a quite powerful process, or feature rather, and it's particularly important because there are a number of users, frankly, who don't have the ability to just sit by their screen all day and look at a dashboard, right? So although we can pop it up on the screen in front of them, we can't rely that they're there, so we might need it to arrive as a message to their cell phone or something like that. Another question, a good one here actually. How does Kofax Analytics for Capture relate to the KCAR? For those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's the Kofax Capture Advanced Reporting and the Kofax Monitor products. They seem similar. So let's take those in two parts. So KCAR, again, for those of you who aren't familiar, that's the Kofax Capture Advanced Reporting. This is kind of what I hinted at earlier and then some of the earlier slides. You know, we built a number of predefined reports to make it easier for our customers to be able to analyze their environment, to look at their environment and keep tabs on what was happening. And in fact, that was some of the genesis for the Analytics for Capture dashboard. So pretty much anything that you would find in any of the standard advanced reports or KCAR reports is already built into the Analytics for Capture dashboard. So as you might imagine, you know, the preferred way for most of our customers is going to be to deal with that in a highly interactive dashboard instead of, you know, static, you know, reports that you have to kill a tree and print some paper to actually really evaluate. So on that one, I would say that Analytics for Capture will, you know, at some point, you know, supersede probably the interest in the KCAR product, but there's a very tight tie to the underlying databases and data sources. So we actually use the KCAR technology as part of it. And in fact, if you don't already have KCAR and you buy the Kofax Analytics for Capture 1.0 product, you actually get KCAR as part of it. It's actually provided to you as part of the package. The second part, Kofax Monitor, that's a different story. So for Kofax Monitor, unlike KCAR, which really is a kind of think of it as an earlier generation, right, of what Analytics for Capture is trying to do for you just more powerfully, Monitor actually solves a very different problem. So Monitor is very much about monitoring the health and well-being of your environment, right? So it's more in the area of systems monitoring. And so while you certainly potentially could use the AltoSoft technology to, you know, maybe keep tabs on something like that and show a dashboard screen or a chart or something like that, the reality is that they're very different products and solve very different problems, and Monitor is very much specialized for that type of activity. So, you know, at this point, I would say, you know, you certainly would expect to see Kofax Monitor and the Analytics for Capture, you know, sort of family of products and series of products, you know, to coexist for a good long while. So let me do one little rundown here just to make sure I didn't miss anything here. Let's see. I guess one outstanding question here is what's involved with implementing Kofax Analytics for Capture. Today, basically what we have is the Analytics for Capture bundle is actually provided with an attached professional services pre-built service offering, so that Kofax Professional Services will come in and help you get installed and provide the initial training necessary to be able to allow you to go and do both the installation and configuration, which is pretty straightforward, as well as teach you, how to use the basic dashboard designer functionality that Dimitri demoed for you. If you work with our partners are being enabled as we speak to go through, training and certification and working with us to get up to speed on exactly what it takes to do that as well. And of course, we've got great partners, so that we expect to come on very quickly. But really, it's a pre-built installer specific to the Analytics for Capture product, so they can be installed very efficiently over top of your current environment. So with that, I'll do one last call to see if any other questions pop up here quickly. Otherwise, I think we're coming to the end of our time. So I want to thank everybody, and I'll turn it back over to the operator.
Thank you for all your questions, and thank you again for joining us. This concludes our program. You may now disconnect.